crowd than...
I know the companies very well. I know what they're doing, but I have to see what percentage of market they have. We have to see the Netflix percentage of market, Paramount, the percentage of market. I mean, none of them are particularly great friends of mine. You know, I want to do what's right. It's so very important to do what's right.
Paramount deal is supported by Jared Kushner, Mr. President. Would that impact your decision?
If Paramount is, I don't know. I've never spoken to him about it. He's really trying to work on Gaza. I think Gaza's his primary thing is Gaza.
You're making house visits on Christmas.
You just watched the President of the United States stand before cameras and cameras and cameras again, and tell us in his own fumbling words that he wants to do what's right, while his son-in-law Jared Kushner sits there like a spider in the center of a multi-billion-dollar web of corruption, so vast and so brazen that it makes the robber barons of the Gilded Age look like amateur pickpockets at a county fair. And this is happening right now, this very moment as we speak, because Paramount revealed in a Securities and Exchange Commission filing that its hostile bid for Warner Brothers Discovery is being backed by Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. And wait, it gets so much worse because the filing disclosed that sovereign wealth funds from Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and Qatar are also participating in this deal, and we're supposed to sit here and pretend that this is normal, that this is just business as usual, that there's nothing to see here, when the man who whispers in the president's ear about Middle East policy just happens to be bankrolling a massive media consolidation play with billions upon billions of dollars from authoritarian regimes that have a vested interest in controlling American discourse and shaping American consciousness. Listen to Trump's words again, because they reveal everything you need to know about the moral bankruptcy at the heart of this administration. He says, I want to do what's right, and it's so very important to do what's right. Like he's reciting lines from a teleprompter written by someone who learned about ethics from a children's book. And then when directly asked about whether Kushner's involvement with Paramount would impact his decision, he dodges, he deflects, he dissembles, claiming Trump suggested he was unaware of Kushner's involvement with Paramount, which is such a staggering insult to our collective intelligence that it borders on performance art, because we're expected to believe that the president who obsesses over media coverage, who watches cable news for hours, who tweets and posts about every slight real or imagined, somehow doesn't know that his own son-in-law, the man married to his daughter, the man who has advised him on everything from Middle East peace to criminal justice reform, is dropping Gulf state petrodollars into one of the biggest entertainment mergers in modern Hollywood history. And here's where it becomes not just corrupt, but architecturally, systematically, devastatingly corrupt, in a way that should make every single person who cares about democratic governance feel their blood pressure spike, because Kushner has long faced questions about his mixing of business and politics, and as his private equity network and foreign funding expand, that's unlikely to change, and we have known this, we have documented this, we have screamed about this into the void for years now, and yet here we are watching it happen again in real time, with higher stakes and bigger numbers, and more brazen disregard for even the pretense of ethical boundaries. Some 99% of the regulatory assets under Affinity's management came from non-U.S. sources according to SEC filing, which means that Kushner's entire investment operation, his entire financial empire, is essentially a conduit for foreign money, foreign influence, foreign power, flowing directly into American political and now American media infrastructure, and we're supposed to just accept this as the new normal. The historical parallels here should terrify us, because we've seen this movie before. We've watched how media consolidation in the hands of politically connected oligarchs destroys democratic discourse and transforms the public sphere into a plaything for the powerful. But this isn't just about media consolidation. Although Senator Elizabeth Warren said the Netflix-Warner Bros. Combination would create one massive media giant with control of close to half of the streaming market, and that alone should trigger every antitrust alarm bell in the country. No, this is about something far more insidious, because Paramount is telling Warner Bros. Discovery shareholders that it has a smoother path to regulatory approval than does Netflix, and Kushner's involvement only strengthens that case, which is a polite way of saying that they're banking on nepotism and corruption, and access to Trump to grease the wheels of government approval for a deal that would concentrate even more power in even fewer hands. And let's talk about Jared Kushner for a moment, because his story is the story of American oligarchy in the 21st century. This is a man who had no experience in private equity, and whose most significant business experience before entering the White House was nearly bankrupting his family real estate company by purchasing an aging office building in New York for $1.8 billion, and yet somehow Affinity Partners secured about $3 billion in investments, including $2 billion from Saudi Arabia, plus additional funds from Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Taiwanese billionaire Terry Gou, and there are no U.S. investors, none, zero, which tells you everything you need to know about whether this is a legitimate investment vehicle or a legalized bribery scheme, dressed up in private equity clothing. Saudi Arabia pays Kushner 1.25% of its investment annually as a management fee, while other investors pay 2%, and so far Affinity Partners has collected approximately $157.5 million in management fees from foreign investors, including $87 million from Saudi Arabia, which means that even if Kushner never makes a single successful investment, even if every single deal tanks, he's already pocketed over $150 million in fees alone from foreign governments that have strategic interests in American policy. This is not capitalism. This is not meritocracy. This is not the free market at work. This is what scholars of authoritarianism call state capture. This is what happens when the line between public power and private profit dissolves completely, and you get a ruling class that sees government as nothing, more than an opportunity for self-enrichment and family enrichment, and the enrichment of their cronies and allies. During Trump's first term, Kushner and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reportedly cultivated a close bond, and Kushner described MBS as a visionary leader, even after Trump hosted a friendly visit for MBS, where the president sparked outrage by saying a lot of people didn't like slain Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, which is a euphemistic way of acknowledging that Kushner has been willing to look the other way on murder and dismemberment and authoritarian brutality in exchange for billions of dollars in investment capital. The ethical rot here runs so deep that it's created a kind of moral event horizon where normal standards of conduct simply cease to exist. In the years that followed Affinity's launch, lawmakers sought to probe the firm over potential conflicts of interest, and in 2024, top Democrats asked then-Attorney General Merrick Garland to appoint a special counsel to investigate Kushner's business ties to foreign powers. But nothing happened because the mechanisms we have for enforcing ethical standards and preventing corruption have been systematically dismantled or rendered toothless by a political system that rewards precisely this kind of behavior. And now Kushner is back, as part of peace talks regarding the Russia-Ukraine and Israel-Hamas wars, which means that the same man who is collecting hundreds of millions in fees from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE is simultaneously advising the president on policy decisions that directly affect those very same countries and their strategic interests, and we're all supposed to pretend that these conflicts of interest don't exist or don't matter. Let's zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture, because Paramount CEO David Ellison said that they've had great conversations with the president about Paramount potentially becoming the owner of CNN, a frequent target of Trump's vitriol, and this should make every journalist in America break out in a cold sweat because we're watching in real time as a president who has spent years attacking the free press as the enemy of the people now has the opportunity to decide which of his billionaire allies gets to own one of the major news networks in the country. The president inserting himself in the deal is obviously problematic regardless of the parties involved, as one expert noted. But when you add the Kushner connection, when you add the Saudi money, when you add the years of documented corruption, it becomes something far worse than problematic. It becomes an existential threat to the very idea of a free and independent press. The Trump administration is viewing the Netflix deal with heavy skepticism, according to a senior Trump administration official, and Trump said that he will be involved in the process of approving the deal, which means that the president is explicitly signaling that he intends to use his regulatory power, his government authority to pick winners and losers in a massive corporate merger battle, and one of those potential winners just happens to be backed by his son-in-law and by foreign governments that have showered his family with money. This is corruption so naked, so shameless that it would be rejected as too on the nose in a political thriller. But here we are living through it, watching it unfold in regulatory filings and Sunday evening red carpet interviews. And let's talk about David Ellison for a moment, because Paramount was recently acquired by David Ellison, son of longtime Republican donor Larry Ellison, whom Trump named as one of several U.S. billionaires to take control of the U.S. assets of TikTok. So we have this perfect little oligarchic ecosystem where Trump gives regulatory favors to Larry Ellison, the Oracle founder worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and Larry Ellison's son just happens to be pursuing a merger that's being financed by Trump's son-in-law, using money from foreign governments that want favorable treatment from the Trump administration, and they're all going to get together and decide who controls American media and American discourse, and the channels through which Americans receive information about their own government. If you pitched this as a conspiracy theory 5 years ago, people would have laughed you out of the room for being too paranoid. But now it's just Monday morning in America. In September, Kushner was credited with negotiating the president's Gaza peace plan, working alongside Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, 3 countries that combined have given him more than $2.5 billion for his investment firm, and I want everyone to sit with that for a moment, because the implications are staggering. We have a presidential advisor who is supposedly working on behalf of American interests in one of the most complex and tragic geopolitical conflicts of our time, and he is simultaneously on the payroll of the governments whose interests he is supposedly balancing. How is that different from being a foreign agent? How is that different from the kind of corruption that we associate with failed states and banana republics? At a White House press briefing, one journalist asked how the White House decided it was appropriate for Jared Kushner to be working on the matters that involve Qatar and the UAE and Saudi Arabia, 3 countries that combined have given him more than $2.5 billion for his investment firm, and Trump's press secretary snapped that it was frankly despicable to suggest it was inappropriate for someone to be so nobly donating his energy and his time to secure world peace, and that was the end of that conversation. Because in Trump's America, you're not allowed to even ask the question without being accused of some kind of treasonous impurity. The nepotism here violates every principle that democracies are supposed to be built on, because Trump's hiring of his son-in-law and daughter undoubtedly violates the intended purpose of the anti-nepotism statute originally passed after President Kennedy appointed his brother as Attorney General, and allowing nepotism, especially at the highest level of government, undermines the integrity of the administration's policymaking. But Trump found a loophole. He exploited a technicality. He decided that the law doesn't apply to him, because the law never applies to him, because he exists in a zone of impunity that he has constructed through shamelessness, and through the complicity of a political party that has abandoned any pretense of caring about ethics or norms or the basic functioning of democratic institutions. Financial filings show the couple disclosed up to $640 million in outside income while working in the White House, and at the same time the couple failed to entirely divest from their businesses, which suggests that as Trump's daughter and son-in-law decamped from the White House, they left a trail of ethical breaches in their wake. And here's what makes this moment so dangerous, so historically significant. Because we're not just watching corruption, we're watching the normalization of corruption. We're watching the construction of a system where this kind of behavior becomes expected, becomes accepted, becomes just the way things work. Paramount CEO David Ellison, who has developed a close relationship with Trump, has pitched his broader strategy to the administration, including plans to merge CNN with CBS News if the deal closes, and says the resulting operation would focus on trust and reach a broad middle-of-the-road audience. And I want everyone to understand what this means in practice. It means that a billionaire with close ties to Trump, and whose bid is being financed by Trump's son-in-law using Saudi money, is planning to take over CNN and CBS News and reshape them according to his vision of what journalism should be, and Trump gets to decide whether that happens. The market responded exactly as you would expect, because shares of Warner Bros. Discovery rose Monday amid expectations of a bidding war, while Paramount traded higher, and Netflix fell. Because Wall Street understands something that apparently large swaths of the American public either don't understand or have chosen to ignore, which is that access to Trump is worth billions of dollars, that proximity to power translates directly into market value, that we have created a system where the president's personal relationships and family connections are among the most valuable commodities in the entire economy. This is not capitalism. This is feudalism. This is a return to a pre-modern system of patronage and favor trading, dressed up in the language of market efficiency and shareholder value. Let's talk about media consolidation more broadly, because even if we set aside all the corruption, all the conflicts of interest, all the foreign money, all the nepotism, we would still be looking at a deal that represents a fundamental threat to democratic discourse. Netflix's move to acquire Warner Bros. Follows prior entertainment industry consolidation, including Disney acquiring 21st Century Fox for $71.3 billion in 2019, and Amazon acquiring Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer for $8.5 billion, and should the Netflix deal go through, would continue this trend of streaming consolidation, and we are watching the construction of what scholars call an oligopoly, where a handful of massive corporations control the entire landscape of cultural production and information distribution. This matters, this really truly matters, because in a democracy, the public sphere, the space where citizens come together to debate and discuss and form opinions, is supposed to be plural and diverse and open, and instead we're watching it get carved up among a smaller and smaller number of billionaire-owned entities that have every incentive to protect the interests of the powerful and every disincentive to challenge the status quo. And Trump just stands there and lies to our faces, claiming he hasn't spoken to Kushner about this, that Trump suggested he was unaware of Kushner's involvement, and then pivoting to some word salad about GSA, when he clearly means Gaza, saying he's really trying to work on GSA. I think Gaza's his primary thing is GSA, which would be funny if it weren't so terrifying, because it reveals a president who is either completely detached from reality or who thinks that we are so stupid that he can just say whatever comes into his head and we'll all nod along. Either option should disqualify him from holding the office, but here we are. Hours after Trump's comments, Paramount CEO David Ellison, who is the son of billionaire GOP megadonor and close Trump ally Larry Ellison, announced the hostile bid, and Senator Elizabeth Warren asked if that's an open invite for CEOs to curry favor with Trump in exchange for merger approvals, saying it should be an independent decision by the Department of Justice based on the law and facts, and Warren is absolutely right to ask that question, because what we're witnessing is the complete collapse of the wall that's supposed to separate regulatory decisions from political favoritism. When the president announces that he's going to be involved in a merger decision, and then one of the bidders just happens to be connected to his son-in-law and his biggest donors, it doesn't take a doctorate in political science to understand that the fix is in, that the game is rigged, that we have moved beyond even pretending that merit or law or the public interest has anything to do with how these decisions get made. The international dimension of this corruption cannot be overstated because Paramount's tender offer lists the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, Limad Holding Company of Abu Dhabi, Qatar Investment Authority and affinity partners Jared Kushner, as investors who would under a successful deal scenario hold non-voting equity and forgo governance rights including board seats. The filing states that because these investors are structured without such rights, the transaction will not be within CFIUS's jurisdiction, and reports have suggested that Warner Bros. Discovery's board opted for Netflix's deal, as it lacked any foreign financing components, which means that Kushner and the Ellisons have deliberately structured this deal to avoid scrutiny from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which exists specifically to prevent foreign governments from gaining control over strategically important American assets. They're not even hiding it. They're putting it right there in the regulatory filings that yes, there are billions of dollars from foreign governments involved, but don't worry, they promise not to exercise any control, even though they're putting up the money, even though they clearly expect something in return for their investment. This is how democracies die, not with jackboots and military coups, but with regulatory filings and hostile takeover bids and sons-in-law who collect management fees from authoritarian regimes while advising the president on foreign policy. This is how the public sphere gets captured, how the mechanisms of accountability get dismantled, how the very possibility of democratic governance gets hollowed out from the inside, until all that's left is a shell of institutions that no longer serve the public interest, but exist purely to legitimize the wealth extraction and power consolidation of a tiny oligarchic class. And Trump stands there at the Kennedy Center, or on a red carpet somewhere, and says with a straight face that he wants to do what's right, that it's so very important to do what's right, while his son-in-law is orchestrating one of the most brazen examples of corruption, state capture in modern American history. We need to understand that this is not just about one deal or one merger or one corrupt family. This is about whether we still have a functioning democracy, or whether we have already crossed over into something else, into a system where power and wealth are so concentrated and so intertwined that the very concept of public interest becomes meaningless. A filing confirms that Paramount's tender offer is supported by $24 billion in debt financing from sovereign wealth funds from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi, as well as from Jared Kushner's affinity partners, and every single American should be asking themselves whether they're comfortable with foreign governments that stone women for adultery, that murder journalists, that fund terrorism, being major financial backers of the companies that produce our entertainment and deliver our news. The tragedy here, the real gut-wrenching tragedy, is that we saw this coming, we documented it, we warned about it, and yet here we are watching it happen again, watching it get worse, watching the corruption become more brazen and more systematic and more normalized. During his first term, Trump defied White House ethics norms by engaging in brazen cronyism and nepotism, appointing unqualified family members and loyal donors to powerful government positions, and in 2017, Trump named Jared Kushner as senior White House advisor and gave Ivanka Trump a similar advisory role. Both Jared and Ivanka ignored ethics rules during their time in the White House, including refusing to divest from significant financial investments, and now they're back doing the exact same thing with even bigger numbers, and even more foreign money, and even less pretense that any of this is ethical or legal or in the public interest. This is your democracy on oligarchy. This is what it looks like when the guardrails fail, when the institutions that are supposed to prevent corruption either can't or won't act, when a political party decides that winning is more important than governing ethically, when large swaths of the public either don't care or actively celebrate this kind of behavior because they see it as their team winning. But nobody wins in a system like this except the oligarchs, except the people who are already at the top, except the Kushners and the Ellisons and the Saudi princes who are using American democracy as a vehicle for their own enrichment and their own power consolidation. The rest of us lose. We lose the ability to trust our institutions. We lose the public sphere. We lose the very possibility of collective self-governance, because how can you have democracy when the people making the decisions are on the payroll of foreign governments and family members and billionaire cronies? So when Trump stands there and mumbles about market share and percentages and doing what's right, understand that what you're watching is not incompetence, it's not buffoonery, it's not just another Trump gaffe. What you're watching is the naked exercise of corrupt power. What you're watching is a president who knows that he can get away with this because he's gotten away with everything else. What you're watching is the final stages of democratic decay, where the corruption becomes so pervasive and so normalized that it stops even registering as corruption and just becomes how things work. And unless we find the collective will to say no, to demand accountability, to insist that there are still rules and that those rules still matter, then this is just the beginning. This is just the preview of a future where every major decision gets made based on who paid whom and who's related to whom, and which foreign government ponied up the most money, and the concept of the public interest becomes a quaint relic of a bygone era that we tell our grandchildren about when they ask us what democracy used to mean.